Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Advanced Bass Fishing, and really appreciate you guys checking today's video out and spending some time with me, because we're going to be talking about one of my favorite cover to fish bass around, and that is rocks. I want to sort of have a foundational video here, give you guys some good information on just how to fish rock, different types of rock. There's a lot of different type of rock in terms of size and how it's positioned within a lake. And I sort of want to go over, you guys, some of my favorite techniques for fishing rock season by season, and think it's going to add up to some good fish for you guys over the course of the next few years. Also, guys, if you like what is going on here at Advanced Bass Fishing and you want to support the channel, the best way you guys can do it is just go to my links that I put in every video description, and just use and bookmark that Tackle Warehouse link of mine for your fishing gear. If you buy anything you guys buy there, the channel receives a small commission, a part of the commission from the sale, so that's a good way to give back. And just also like to invite everybody to please hit that subscribe button to the channel. That'd be really appreciated. Okay, a lot of you guys that watch the channel, you hear me talking a lot about rock. Riprap, channel banks, bluff banks, gravel banks, whatever, because rock is a great bass fishing structure. And there's a lot to it. There's a lot of variables that really determine how to fish rock and the techniques that it works on it. So what I want to do in today's video, I want to go over how I like to fish rock at different times of the year. And sometimes better than others. Sometimes that rock is not the greatest thing to fish, but most of the time it's really good. So I'm going to go over some of my favorite scenarios in today's episode. So let's break it up a little bit instead of like season into water temperatures, because water temperatures will dictate, the productivity of riprap and techniques you want to use more than anything else. So let's talk about fishing riprap when the water is in the 40s, in the cold weather months, December through March in a lot of parts of the country. Now, when you're fishing clearwater rock in the cold weather, there's two different type of things you have to consider, and these two things go over in about every season, and that's your water clarity in relationship to the rock. That'll determine the techniques that you like to use. Now, when the water's cold, and if I have what's called a little bit of stain to the water, say the water visibility is under 2.5 foot, in that foot to 2.5 foot zone, which is about as dirty as I like to fish when the water's that cold. It's hard to beat some type of subtle crankbait, some type of small, finessey, flat-sided, quiet crankbait is a really good lure to catch them on in that situation. So I'll be using stuff like, maybe like a little Rapala, Shad Rap, a flat-sided crankbait, maybe, that Megabass Super Z2, something really small, normally in a shad pattern. And when the water's really cold, you're going to find out that bass like a shad pattern better than a crawdad pattern, which is usually better when the water's in the 50s. So I'll take some type of small little shad pattern crankbait, and I like to fish it on a spinning rod because I can fish a smaller crankbait deeper, and I just make long parallel casts to those rocky banks and try to target that 2 to 4 foot zone with those crankbaits. Again, the rock can be bluffs, rocky banks, riprap, whatever, but that's what I like to use on it. Now, if the water temperature is, if the water clarity is cleaner than, 2.5 feet, say for example, it's 3 foot or greater, that's when I go to the jerkbait. The jerkbait is hard to beat when the water's 40, when you're fishing rocky type areas. Again, I don't really want to go too much into the specific type of rock, because a lot of these techniques will work regardless of the size of the rock that you're fishing. But a jerkbait is going to be a really good bait. And again, I'll parallel those banks with it. I'll move out a little bit further, because in the wintertime when the water's cold, a lot of those fish can be suspended out off those rocky banks over 10 to 20 foot of water. So say for example, if I've got water visibility, of 7 or 8 foot clarity, I may put my boat in 15 or 20 foot of water and parallel those rocks to try to target those suspended bass with that. This is also one time of year where I don't like a lot of wind. Just a little breeze is okay, but I don't like to fish this type of a pattern if the wind is blowing greater than like 15 miles an hour. Okay, now the transformation, there's always a transformation that takes place as the water warms up. Now, as the water warms up into the 50s in the springtime of the year, it opens up a lot of different other techniques to the to the rocky bank fishing. Your crankbaits are still going to be working good, but you're going to have a little bit of a change in the profile of the crankbaits. As that water warms up into the 50s, you're going to find out your a little bit larger, more aggressive crankbaits may work better. Something like a larger square bill crankbait, like a wigglewort, possibility of like a larger lipless crankbait. Fish are a little bit more aggressive. They're feeding on bigger baits when the water's in the 50s. So that is a big player. But for me, when that water starts getting into the 50s, I start moving away from crankbaits a little bit. I still fish them quite a bit, but it starts opening me up for some other type of techniques. And those techniques include like, maybe a jig can be good, a chatterbait, or slow rolling a spinnerbait. I have caught a ton of good fish, slow rolling like a big 3/4 ounce spinnerbait down rocky banks. Same with the jig, just pitching that jig up to the rocks and fishing it off of there. Alabama rig, like I said, you can do pretty good when the water's in the 50s, just paralleling those type of areas. And one of the things you'll notice when the water temperature gets up in the 50s, it helps if you do have some lower light conditions and a little bit more wind. So say, for example, if the water temperature is 55, I like those situations where like the wind is, maybe blowing 10 miles an hour, cloudy day, and that's really going to activate those fish to hit those bigger moving lures under those conditions. Now, when the water temperature starts to get into the 60s, this is normally right around when the fish are starting to spawn. I don't do that great around rock. I mean, I usually move to a little bit flatter, smaller stuff that those fish tend to spawn around, like gravelly type areas. But if there's one time a year when the rocks are not quite that great, it is when the water temperature's in the 60s. For whatever reason, this can be in the fall or the spring. But I find that when the water's in the 60s, it seems like those soft plastics in the bottom lures are working a little bit better. Now, when the water temperature starts getting up into the 70s, this can be anywhere like May, June, depending upon your part of the country. This is a really good time of year to fish riprap, because once that water temperature starts hitting 70, a lot of those fish will start moving to that riprap areas to feed on shad, because shad love to spawn on riprap in May. And this is a really good time to fish a smaller spinnerbait on riprap. So I'll take like a little 1/4 or 3/8 ounce small profile spinnerbait and just work down those riprap banks with it, especially early in the morning during low light conditions. And of course, this is going to be a technique that works, better if the water has a little bit of color to it. Now, as you get into the summertime of the year, this is when you really have to concentrate on the rock that has the dirtiest water in the lake. So if I'm going to fish during the summertime of the year or even into early fall, I'm going to be fishing like the upper river sections, the upper creek tributaries, trying to find that really off-colored water that'll put those fish shallower against those rocky banks. So one of my favorite things to do in the summer and the fall time of the year is I'll run up as far as I can get up the river arms or the creek arms, and I like to get on the steepest rocky bank that I can find in those areas. And square bill crankbait is really good. Fishing it fast. One of the things you want to do on rock when the water's warm and stained is you want to fish that square bill crankbait with a stop and go retrieve. Fishing it pretty fast can be really productive. Now, as you start to get into the fall time of the year, like, late September, October, and into November, this is when I like to continue fishing rock. It's a little bit more diverse, but I like to mix it up with a couple different techniques. Now, early in the fall, I go with a small crankbait, some type of a small, inch and a half long crankbait. Looking for the off-colored water that has some stain to it. In the fall time of the year, I prefer those flatter type areas. Flat areas with stained water, those are the really good type of areas to fish with, like the little small square bill or something like that Megabass Super Z2 crankbait can work good. That's a really good way to catch them. Now, as you get later in the fall time of the year, when the water temperature starts cooling down a little bit, that's when a topwater can work good. A buzz bait, if the water's got a little stain to it, a walking bait like a Zaraspook can be really good when that water starts getting in the upper 50s or around 60. And just paralleling those rocky banks with a topwater bait, whopper plopper can be really good too. Is a really good way to catch them. Also, one other thing, guys, you want to try in the fall time of the year. If that water temperature is around 60, try burning a little small finesse spinnerbait on a rocky bank when the wind's blowing hard on it. So if you get a cloudy, rainy type day with some wind on rock, burning a little bitty spinnerbait just under the surface is a really good way to catch them. So anyway, guys, that's just a quick sort of a broad overview of how to catch some fish, on rock there. A lot of other stuff to it, we'll cover more of that in the future, but I just wanted to throw that out to you guys for a little bit. So hope you guys are well. We'll talk later.